I'm Rakesh Mohan. I'm Senior Fellow in the Jackson Institute for Global Affairs and also Professor of International Economics in the School of Management. I have the privilege of introducing Ambassador Her Excellency Nirupama Rao. We are very delighted that you are visiting Yale. I'm particularly delighted because I graduated from here and now I'm teaching here, so very nice to see you here. Just to give a few words of introduction, Mrs. Rao is of course now the Ambassador of India to the United States. She retired as Foreign Secretary of India, where she was Foreign Secretary 2009 to 2011, which is the highest position in the Indian Foreign Service. What is quite amazing about her career in Foreign Service is that she served in all parts of the world except perhaps Africa. So that she's been ambassador to China, she's been ambassador to Sri Lanka, she's been ambassador to Peru and Bolivia, and also the deputy chief of mission to Moscow. Among the other things is that she was also the chief spokesperson for the Ministry of External Affairs 2001-2002, and I do remember during the somewhat unfortunate meeting between Prime Minister Vajpayee and President Musharraf that you had to then bear the burden of explaining or not explaining what happened in Agra. And I remember very well those of us who were in Delhi watching you and wondering what you're going to say when that happened. She is a real, true representative of India, having grown up in all parts of the country, Bangalore, Pune, Lucknow, Kannur, so all parts of the country. Her husband is also most recently retired as Chief Secretary of Karnataka, also a distinguished civil servant, and was quite amazing in having served all over the world. Her husband being a busy fellow also in the Indian Administrative Service. I don't know how you raised two sons in doing all that. There is one error that she has made in her life, which is that she went to the Harvard CIA, that is Harvard Center for International Affairs. And I guess that's because Jackson Institute didn't exist then. So there's still a chance for you to make up for your error in the past. Ambassador Rao.
Thank you, Professor Rakesh Mohan, Dr. George Joseph, dear friends, students. I'm delighted to be here this evening at Yale University, one of the finest seats of learning and the imparting of knowledge. It's really an honor for me to address all of you this evening on the subject of India-US relations. Yale has had a historical connection with India that goes back more than 3 centuries. And we all know the story of Elihu Yale and his days in Madras, now called Chennai. In fact, Yale has been a pioneer among US universities when it comes to the study of India, its languages, its literature, its religions, its history, its politics, economics, and society. I understand that Yale was the first US university to begin the teaching of Sanskrit. Many eminent Indians and Indian Americans have passed through its portals. Yale is not only continuing its engagement with India today, but has strengthened it and broadened it through the Yale India initiative that was launched in 2008. I'm aware of the leadership programs that you have and the Indian parliamentarians who have been coming to Yale in that context, and also the recently initiated program that involves vice-chancellors, many of them here from leading Indian universities, whom you have brought to Yale. This is an excellent initiative, and I hope it gathers strength and momentum in the years to come. And I know there are about, if I'm not mistaken, 157 Indian students in Yale today. That is a significant number. I believe they're second only to the Chinese students here. And I hope the tribe of Indian students increases as the years go by, especially since you have given India such a special and unique focus in the programs of your university. So let me say that Yale is making a singular contribution to fostering greater understanding between the Indian and American peoples. People-to-people connections are in fact the warp and the weft of the rich fabric of the India-US relationship. Indeed, the key element of our partnership has been people-centric, and in this we seek to respond to popular aspirations that go beyond the calculations of political expediency. Yale is therefore, I believe, doing yeoman's service in promoting and strengthening relations between our two countries. And in this context, I would like to thank Dr. Richard Levin, I know he's traveling, president of the Yale University, for his leadership and commitment for enhancing Yale's connections with India. As both India and the US work towards becoming truly knowledge societies, we believe there are immense opportunities to forge new links in the areas of education, research, and innovation, as also technology and skill development. Therefore, the deepening of our cooperation in the field of education has been identified by both governments as a key priority as we chart the course ahead for our strategic partnership. India-US cooperation in the field of education is therefore poised for major expansion today. We in India see education as critical for achieving our goals to have inclusive growth and to realize the potential to take the Indian economy on an even higher growth trajectory. Our government has announced new initiatives, major initiatives, for massive expansion and upgradation of the education infrastructure, both in the primary education sector as also higher education. In a little over a week from now, the first India-US Higher Education Summit will be held in Washington, D.C., co-chaired by our Minister of Human Resource Development and the United States Secretary of State. The summit will bring together not just government officials, but also academics and entrepreneurs who are engaged in this area, and will provide a platform to develop blueprints for furthering our horizons in this area. This is just one of the facets of our multifaceted partnership with the United States today. Ours is a partnership that seeks to meet the common aspirations that both our countries have for mutual prosperity and for peace and security. President Obama's landmark visit to India last November has indeed helped in elevating this relationship to a new level. The expanding cooperation between India and the United States is strongly rooted in our shared values of democracy, individual freedoms, and rule of law, in excellent people-to-people contacts and business linkages, and in our increasing ability to work together in a variety of fields, from fighting the menace of terrorism to ensuring the stability of the global economy. In India, we regard the United States as our most important partner in our quest for social and economic development, and we are working to expand our relations across the entire spectrum of our bilateral agenda, including in areas which I believe are of importance to the United States as well, areas such as trade and investment, science and technology, clean energy, health, higher education, and agriculture. In fact, the 5 key pillars of the strategic dialogue that was initiated between the two countries in July of 2009, when Secretary of State Clinton visited India for discussions with our External Affairs Minister, Mr. S.M. Krishna, are the following: strategic cooperation, energy and climate change, education and development, economic, trade and agriculture, S&T, that's science and technology, health and education. Let me take a few moments to elaborate on this, if I may say, many-splendored nature of our relationship. The steady growth of the Indian economy has not only helped improve the living standards of many of our peoples, but has also opened up new opportunities to expand our mutually beneficial economic and commercial ties with the United States. Two-way trade in goods continues to grow, steadily reaching about $49 billion last year. The service trade is buoyant, and capital flows are moving in both directions. The US businesses are becoming strong partners in India's growth story, and Indian businesses are creating value, wealth, and jobs here in America. Because India-US economic ties have been knowledge, technology, and people-intensive, they've had a profound impact on the relationship that goes beyond even the business sector. In order to continue on our high-growth path, India will need to invest in building a world-class infrastructure that could cater to the demands of our billion-plus population and ensure the availability of clean sources of energy to fuel such growth. In both these areas, both countries are working to build mutually beneficial ties. Yale's partnership with the Energy Research Institute, TERI, for the US-India Energy Summit in 2009 is an example of the kind of innovative linkages that our two countries are tapping for partnership in the vital area of clean energy. With the US, we are now engaged in seeking a broad array of clean energy solutions. In India, we have also placed the highest importance in improving our agricultural productivity so that it results in better livelihoods for our rural population. We are partnering with the US across the entire range of issues relating to agriculture, from using space technology for better monsoon prediction and crop productivity to improve linkages from farm to market. I understand that Yale has developed some excellent partnerships with China and Chinese universities in this area. It is my hope that under your India initiative, you will be able to expand your partnership with Indian agricultural universities that would benefit both India and the US. Health is yet another critical area where there are exciting opportunities for collaboration. Our scientists are already working with US institutions such as the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control, capitalizing on each other's comparative advantages and skills. Here again, it's my hope that Yale would take a lead in forging partnerships with Indian institutions for research, development, and deployment of cutting-edge technologies in pharmaceutical and biotechnology sectors that would contribute to better health for our peoples. Some exciting developments are already taking place in this field. We've had instances where US companies have collaborated with Indian biotech and pharmaceutical companies to develop cutting-edge treatment for serious and chronic diseases. India and the US have established a Science and Technology Endowment Fund to help foster such mutually beneficial collaborations. We have also, in yet another sign of mutual confidence, overcome concerns of the past on India's space program and have made a promising beginning in a new era of cooperation. I believe in co-development of a vibrant S&T, science and technology, ecosystem as a new foundation for expanding India-US cooperation, where we harness synergies to produce global public goods. As we work to enhance our mutual prosperity, there is also an increasing level of cooperation between our countries to ensure peace and security in the regional context and in the wider global context. All of us are familiar with the challenges that our two countries face: global economic stress, profound geopolitical changes, especially in Asia, as also regional instability and the continuing threat of terrorism, especially in South Asia. Whether it is terrorism or the challenge of maintaining peace amidst fast-paced changes in the Asia-Pacific, The other day, I saw an Australian commentary which called this the Indo-Pacific, blending the Indian and Pacific Oceans together. Our interests increasingly converge. Our understanding of the nature and the source of problems that we face have also become increasingly similar. Our cooperation in the field of security has entered new territories and explored new frontiers. Our militaries, once unfamiliar with each other, now hold regular dialogue and joint exercises in the air and on land and sea. We coordinate anti-piracy efforts and have worked together on humanitarian missions. Our defense trade was negligible a decade ago, but today we have placed orders worth $8 billion on US companies, and it is bound to grow even more in the future as India looks to modernize its armed forces. The paradigm that we visualize for defense cooperation should incorporate a strong component of joint production, research, and co-development, which are all of strategic importance. Our counterterrorism cooperation has acquired new momentum and depth with the Homeland Security Dialogue and the Counterterrorism Initiative, even as India continues to take steps to improve our domestic capabilities to counter this threat. In Afghanistan, we are not only engaged in our individual assistance efforts, but are now working together in areas such as capacity building, agriculture, and women's empowerment. Both our countries understand the imperative of ensuring success in Afghanistan and defeating the evil designs of those who propagate instability. While successful transition of security in Afghanistan in 2014 is important, that alone would not guarantee long-term stability in the region. This would require building Afghan institutions, Afghan capacities, and more importantly, the elimination of safe havens and the infrastructure for terrorism and violent extremism in Afghanistan and Pakistan, a goal that both our countries share in common. India has invested significant resources in Afghanistan's development in areas identified by Afghanistan. In addition, we feel that there is need to work together with the United States as well as with other regional countries to make Afghanistan a hub, a trade and transit hub linking South and Central Asia. With its growing economy and expanding markets, India can and is willing to partner with other countries and play the role of an anchor for long-term prosperity and stability in the region. In the broader regional context of the ongoing changes in the Asia-Pacific region, there is today much greater awareness between our two countries on our Asian-Pacific identities. We are witnessing the rise simultaneously of several powers in the Asia-Pacific region, and new questions are being raised about the role and responsibilities of extra-regional powers. The region is undergoing rapid change and throwing up new challenges of reconciling historical differences with growing interdependence. We have always been conscious of our Asian identity, of our location at the strategic and cultural crossroads of Asia. The future of the Asia-Pacific region is of vital importance to India's own future. The US, too, regards the region as one of special strategic focus. We are aware of that. The safety of the sea lanes of communication in the Indian Ocean is crucial for economic growth, not just for India and the US, but for the entire region. Maritime trade routes in the Indian Ocean are vital for international commerce and global energy security, and we have a common interest in combating threats such as piracy. 1/5 of the world's energy supplies now travel across the Indian Ocean. Therefore, we have agreed, India and the United States, to enhance our maritime security cooperation. For instance, we are working together with the US and the international community to combat piracy in the Gulf of Aden and off the coast of Somalia. When President Obama visited India last November, he and Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh spelt out the shared vision of both countries for peace, stability, and prosperity in Asia, the Indian Ocean, and Pacific regions. We have agreed to work together and with other countries of the region for evolution of an open, balanced, and inclusive security and economic architecture for the region. We believe that this would need to be a consensus-based process so that all stakeholders can make their respective contributions to regional security. India aspires to this vision in cooperation with all countries, including the US, through partnership, consultation, and dialogue. As the US prepares to participate in the East Asia Summit in November this year, we will continue our consultations to ensure that the summit has a productive outcome. India and the US have been described as natural strategic partners. Our relationship is in a state of constant evolution in a rapidly changing world. We will move forward and deepen our strategic partnership, guided by our long-term objectives and shared ideals of democratic functioning, to meet the important challenges of our times and to advance peace and prosperity in an increasingly interdependent and interconnected world. With that, I'd be happy to take a few questions. Thank you. Yeah, it's fine.
Questions. There are people with the microphones. If you raise your hand, and let's have pointed questions, short, so we can have as many as we possibly can in 15 minutes or so. Yes. And just say who you are.
Sure. Ambassador, my name is Jasmeeta Ahuja. I had the pleasure of working with the former ambassador and ambassador before that while I was in Washington. My question has to do with the recent assassination of Minister Rabbani in Afghanistan. Obviously, India has had many concerns with the reconciliation process, and I was wondering what role you see India now having in that process and what role you see your neighbor Pakistan having.
Well, we did have the opportunity to consult with Professor Rabbani on a number of occasions before this tragic assassination happened. We were in Kabul a few months ago, and one of our stops on that tour was to meet Professor Rabbani and talk to him about the process of reconciliation and how he looked at it and how he was proceeding with it. And just 2 months ago, just before I handed over charge as Foreign Secretary, he was in Delhi with his team from the High Peace Council to talk to us. And he was very interested at that time in looking at how India, as a pluralistic society with a large Muslim community, was managing this diversity, and how India has become known around the world for its moderate Islamic community. By and large, the Muslims of India live in peace with the other communities. And in fact, the Deoband school, for instance, in India, traditionally has been hallmarked for its moderate voice. But it's somehow, in the rest of the region, that's not the case. I mean, it has muted and transmuted into something else. So I think Professor Rabbani had embarked, despite the fact that he was a very complex figure and had managed to survive the ups and downs of Afghan politics over the last 2-3 decades, he, I think, had a genuine commitment to seeing how reconciliation with the Taliban factions and with the diverse groups that were fighting, basically to promote intra-Afghan reconciliation also. Our attitude to that was that the red lines on reconciliation with the Taliban should not be lost sight of. I know that there's a debate on whether that should have been an outcome or that should be part of the process, but India had always been very clear about the fact that there were certain lines that should not be crossed, that they should give up violence, that they should subscribe to the Afghan constitution, that they should abjure terrorism, that they should respect the rights of women. So I think that was understood also by the High Peace Council. Obviously, in Afghanistan today, reconciliation seems to be a very distant dream if you go by the sequence of events and you see the horrible violence that has been unleashed on Afghanistan. In fact, it's a cascading effect of violence that you see. I think Professor Rabbani's assassination raises very fundamental questions about where reconciliation is headed. And I think you've seen the statements coming from President Karzai about the futility as he sees it. I mean, the sense of frustration, which is very natural, for somebody to have given what has happened. President Karzai is going to be visiting India very shortly in the next couple of days. And we will have to see what the outcome of his discussions in Delhi will be. We've maintained close touch. Our Prime Minister was in Kabul a few months ago. We're very concerned, obviously, about the continuing terrorism in the Afpak region. And this has an effect on us. It has an effect on Afghanistan. It has an effect on all the other countries in the region also. I think apart from strengthening Afghan capacity and the ability to deal with their security situation and the institutions of governance, and as I said, intra-Afghan reconciliation. I think there will have to be some system of governance in the country that will enable different voices to come together, but voices that have given up violence. And I think the regional countries, India, Iran, Russia, China, Pakistan, the Central Asian republics, would all have to work together to ensure that Afghanistan is an independent, sovereign country, and which is able to deal with its problems on its own, which is able to trade freely with other countries. I think basically this whole system of transition in Afghanistan is hugely, hugely complicated and complex. But I think the existence of safe havens and the operations of groups. I mean, the word from the Afghan government today has been that there was cross-border involvement in the Rabbani assassination. So we have to get to the root of all this. And I think most importantly, Pakistan will have to turn the searchlight on itself in this regard. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes?
My name is Isha Ambani, and I'm an undergraduate student at Yale. The question I had was, with the recent ongoing events in India, with the anti-corruption campaign, the scans and things like that, how do you think this is affecting the India-USA relationship?
I think the India-US relationship is strong, it's durable, it has very stable foundations. And I think the fact that we discuss a whole spectrum of issues in this partnership speaks for the strength of this relationship. India's internal affairs are internal to India. I think the world from outside sees the strength of our openness and the transparent way in which we deal with our problems. Nothing is hidden from the rest of the world. What you see is what you get when it comes to India. And India has self-correcting mechanisms to deal with these problems. And you have a government, you have democratic institutions, you have a parliament, and you have a judiciary that has stated very clearly that they want to address these demands that have been made by civil society and by the anti-corruption movement, and to come up with viable solutions that preserve the strength of our democratic institutions and that do not detract or diminish the value of parliament or the judiciary or the laws that we have put in place to deal with these matters over the years.
Just wait for the microphone because they're all being recorded.
I'm Professor Mohammad Mia, Vice Chancellor, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Hyderabad. Since reference of Afghanistan is made in political sense, and then our relations with Afghanistan and our concern with Afghanistan is very well known, And you talked about the women empowerment in relation to Afghanistan. What educational institution in India, what do you visualize can do to empower women in Afghanistan? And this is very important from the point of view that we also talking and doing a lot of things to empower women in our country.
Yes, that's very true. I think where women of Afghanistan are concerned, we're already doing, when I spoke about the development assistance that India is extending to Afghanistan, we've done a lot of work in women's empowerment also. And the Self-Employed Women's Association, the SEVA of Ahmedabad, has been involved. And we've created the Baghe-Zanana in Kabul, which is basically for women's empowerment. We teach them, self-help work, and many girls in Kabul and the towns of Afghanistan now go to school. We have young Afghan women who come to India for short-term courses, even in things like journalism. The other day I was addressing a group of radio journalists, radio and television journalists from Kabul and smaller other towns in Afghanistan who were on a 2-week training in India. And many of them were women, and it was very encouraging to see. I think Afghan women have traditionally been very independent and very self-confident. And unfortunately for them, the twists and turns of Afghan politics and the civil war inside the country have destroyed the lives of so many women. So we would very much like to see more and more Afghan women come to India. We are offering scholarships. One of the areas in which we are focusing a lot of effort is in development-related areas like agriculture, like hospitals, like providing doctors, English language teaching. And the numbers of Afghan students who are coming, even self-financed Afghan students, I'm not talking of just scholarships, their families like to send their girls to India for higher studies. So I think our universities should really welcome these students and provide them with that kind of environment where they will feel at home and where they can be well integrated into the system that our universities provide. I think Hyderabad is uniquely placed for that. In fact, India is a country where Afghan communities have come to over the centuries. Almost every mid-sized town and of course big cities in India have Afghan communities who've been there for generations. So that's why we have about 500 people landing in Delhi airport every day from Afghanistan, because we have so many flights coming, not only from Kabul, we have from Kandahar, for instance, people coming for business, people coming for medical reasons, people coming to put their kids in school. So this is a bridge between the two countries that is very strong, and there's a great deal of affection that Indians feel for Afghans and Afghans feel for Indians.
The back, the center.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm Maxwell Kushner-Lenhoff. I'm a senior chemistry major at Yale, and I was just wondering, I know that with the possible Iranian proliferation of nuclear weapons recently, the United States and Obama has spoken out about taking sanctions versus Iran, and India being so close to Iran, just in terms of geographical terms. I was just wondering what you saw India's role as stopping Iran from developing nuclear weapons, or how you saw India fitting into this.
Well, let me say that India has taken a very responsible and very clearly enunciated position on the issue of Iran's nuclear program. Iran is a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it has certain rights that it's entitled to for development of peaceful uses of nuclear energy under that dispensation. But as far as any intent or any move to develop a nuclear weapons program is concerned, India has spoken out very clearly that we are not for Iran's movement in that direction. And a couple of our voting patterns in the IAEA have shown that. I mean, we have not been supportive of Iran's moves or inclinations in that direction. Apart from that, Iran and India, we have a very close and continuing dialogue on security, strategic, foreign policy related issues, apart from trade and economic issues and cultural matters. Iran has a big presence in India, and you know that there are 35 million Shia Muslims in India who are part of the large Muslim community that we have in our country, and they have had traditional linkages with Iran. So Iran is a country that is, in that sense, very close to us. Culturally, we have had enormous interaction with Iran. I was in Iran 2 months ago, and I visited Shiraz and Isfahan. And everywhere I went, I could sense, the muffled footsteps of history, as it were, that link India and Iran together. Trade, Iran, as far as energy security is concerned, is also very important for us. 12% of our import of crude petroleum comes from Iran. And in recent months, because of the sanctions imposed by the United States and other European countries, apart from the UN sanctions, there have been difficulties in effecting payments for these imports from Iran. So to sum up, we cannot be entirely divorced from what happens in Iran today. And we have very close and continuing linkages with Iran, but we've acted with a sense of responsibility when it comes to Iran's nuclear program.
My name is Arjun Ganesan. I'm a second-year MBA student at the Yale School of Management. One of the discussions that we constantly have is with respect to investments in India and when it comes to venture investing, in specific in India. Now, in the United States, most of venture investing typically started with dual-purpose investments. But unfortunately, all sorts of investment that's been happening in India and continues to happen is in the growth sector, and there's very little investing that's happening in the venture sector. Now, could you speak a little bit to the collaboration that has been happening between the United States and India when it comes to the whole science and technology sector and innovation as such?
Well, that's the emphasis I sought to give in my speech today. And I think the linkages between research and R&D institutions, or let's say universities, with industry, which you have in this country, is not so well established in India. And I think that is one area where, when you talk of educational collaboration and bringing in business and industry to be partners in this, we have a lot to learn from the United States. I mentioned the health sector as one area where we can have much more capital coming in and know-how, technology, innovation for co-development and co-research and co-innovation between India and the United States. And finally, agriculture. We talk of an evergreen revolution to supplant the green revolution of the 60s in India. How do you increase agricultural productivity? How do you deal with groundwater availability? How do you increase basically productivity, and productivity of crops that can provide better nutrition to the vast numbers of people who still live in poverty in India? So education, health, science and technology, agriculture, all these are areas where I believe we should be having much more inputs from the United States. I think for political reasons and for certain degrees of estrangement that existed in the past, for whatever reasons, this had not been happening. But the United States, after President Obama's visit last year, announced that it would be relaxing export controls on high technology with India, and that has begun to happen with the removal of 3 of our major entities from the entities list, and the announcement of removal of certain export controls in crime control elements, in regional stability related elements, exports from the United States to India. So we've made a beginning in these areas, and we intend to build on it. There is a bilateral investment treaty in the works also, which should open up the universe a little more.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Yes, 2 days back there was a column in The Guardian which claimed that that Indian government was denying visas and deporting foreign correspondents trying to cover Kashmir, Chhattisgarh and other so sensitive areas. For instance, David Barsami of USA. How do you respond to this column?
Could you also identify yourself?
Sorry, I'm Aniket. I'm a PhD student here.
Aniket from where?
From Nasik, India.
From Nasik, Maharashtra. Okay. I think in the particular case you were referring to, there was a certain infringement of the rules. The person concerned had come in on a tourist visa in the past and reported on and used it for journalistic purposes, which is not permitted under the rules. And every country, you'll appreciate, has certain rules when it comes to giving visas to foreigners. I don't think we have stopped journalists from coming in and reporting on whether it's Kashmir or Chhattisgarh or whether it's the Maoist problems that we have. As I said in answer to another question, our life in India is an open book. I don't think there is any restriction on people coming in and people speaking out. You've seen the nature of debate, the tenor of debate in India. There are 100 schools of thought contending at this moment.
Last three questions, 1, 2, 3.
My name is Samir Quatra. I am a student at the Forestry and Environmental School. For us at the Environmental School, it is heartening to see that energy and climate change are one of the key strategic areas of partnership between the US and India. My question is that when it comes to climate change negotiations, though, the US and India still continue to hold diametrically opposing positions, with the US repeatedly refusing to ratify any international treaty which does not have emerging economies like India and China. So with key environmental summits coming up in Durban and then in Rio, do you foresee any kind of a change in this position and the two countries coming to any kind of an agreement on climate change?
I think that, yes, there are divergences of position when it comes to the multilateral negotiations on climate change. We bring in the developing country dimension. The United States and and its European partners and Japan bring in the developed country dimension. So there is obviously going to be a divergence, but that doesn't stop India and the United States from cooperating in the field of energy and the environment, and especially in energy efficiency, in renewable energy, in clean energy. This has become enormously important. We have an energy dialogue, which is very productive between the two countries. And we are looking at, as I said, energy efficiency, especially in building projects, in clean energy, in exploring things like shale gas reserves in India. So the canvas of cooperation bilaterally between India and the United States in the field of environment is very productive, is very beneficial to both countries. So I think we are able to balance these two aspects. And being friends doesn't mean you have to agree on everything. Friendship, should incorporate within itself the power to say no sometimes.
Thank you, Ambassador Rao. My name is Ashish Mitra. I'm a political science student here at Yale. My question has to do with the Palestinian quest for statehood at the UN. How do you view India's position in this regard, and what impact do you think it will have on the future of Indo-US relations, considering the US's position?
How do I view India's position in this regard? I think it's absolutely correct and unimpeachable. And our support for an independent, viable Palestine, a Palestinian state that exists in peace with Israel, has been well stated and articulated over the years. And our friends and partners know it, the Americans know it. And when Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, met Minister Krishna just last week in New York, this matter was discussed. And the United States understands where India comes from on this. And we have our very principled approach on this issue. We have long-standing ties with the Palestinian people. The people of India, every democracy has its constituencies. And in India, our constituency is the Indian people. And the Indian people's support for the Palestinian cause and the problems that the Palestinian people face have been very well stated, and they are very well entrenched in the psychology of the Indian people. So that is not something we can just jettison or change. So in the Security Council, we have stated that position very clearly, and we've made it very clear that we do support the aspirations of the Palestinian people for that independent, viable state. But it should, of course, exist in peace with Israel, and matters of this nature need to be solved not through violence, but through dialogue.
Ma'am, I'm Ajay Khare. I'm from School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal. I want to ask that that there was one announcement that there would be Indo-US Higher Education Council would be established. For new institutions in India, as you know, IITs and ITs and SPAs, etc., have been expanded. For new institutions in India, will that council would have some role, Indo-US Higher Education Council?
Well, let's see how the summit proceeds. We are just on the eve of having the higher education summit. We'll have to see what the outcomes are. But the desire is to intensify cooperation that will benefit higher education institutions in India of the sort that you mentioned, to infuse more, know-how and experience that comes from outside universities. Just today, when I was talking to the Yale faculty earlier this evening, the idea that came to mind, for instance, is why can't we consider the possibility of more tripartite or trilateral consultations between India, China, and the United States on these issues? Because the Chinese have had a long-standing collaboration with the Americans from the days, when you look back at the founding of Peking University or the founding of Tsinghua University or the founding of Fudan University, you had Americans who came to establish those universities. So there's been a very close linkage. So now that we are thinking of expanding our linkages with the Americans in these fields, I think these three countries can really build a future that will be good for the university-going population in all the three countries.
I would like a Yale student as the last question. Yale student.
Thank you. First, we would like to thank you for coming here and spending some good time with us. I'm with Yale School of Management, Leadership and Healthcare program, and my question to you is there are recent changes in the healthcare policy going on.
Name?
Apurva Patel. There are some recent changes going on in healthcare policy within US with the burgeoning cost, and there are significant deficiencies in Indian healthcare market. So could you please elaborate a little bit on how is there some expedited initiative taken by Indian government to bring in healthcare investment back in India, and like some of the strategic value propositions that you have for US?
I must be honest, I'm not an expert in that field, so I won't be able to answer that question with that level of expertise that you perhaps would want from a healthcare expert. But I spoke about collaboration in development of drugs, of medicines. We've set up a global disease detection center now through a bilateral MOU between India and the United States. So we've started consultations on how the two countries can cooperate and do co-innovation, as I said, and co-development in dealing with chronic disease detection, treatment, development of new vaccines, generic drugs. I spoke about in how US companies and Indian companies are doing excellent work in this field. So we need to institutionalize this a little better. We need to see how we can provide more funding. There's not much funding that comes from the United States for these things at the moment, and that perhaps is understandable given the problems that the economy faces here at this moment. But ideally, we should be doing much more in the public sector than even in the private sector. The Green Revolution in India happened because of the fact that the US government agencies were intimately involved in providing those inputs, those expertise that we needed at that point of time. So if we can recreate that to some extent and build that balance between public and public-private partnerships, it will help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rao, for coming here on a weekend. And I think that the interest in India is indicated by the fact that you have a full house on a Sunday evening, which is not the easiest thing to do at Yale. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.